Hey y'all, today I'm going to show you how to do an old school southern style bread pudding. When I tell y'all this is loaded with flavor, I've got the spices, the pecans, the raisins, a nice vanilla glaze. You guys are going to love this. Now I'm going to take about a half of a cup of raisins and I am going to soak them in some Bacardi, y'all. Some real rum. Now you don't have to do this because I know some of y'all is saints. Y'all don't even touch no alcohol, okay? But this rum flavor, rum and raisin, is a really good pairing, and I'm going to allow this to soak. Ideally overnight, but I'm just going to allow this to soak while I prep my breads. I have two breads here. The bread on the right is actually homemade. This bread, y'all, I made it about a week ago, and I let it get old-fashioned stale, okay? This is solid as a rock, okay? Now, the other loaf is some brioche, and this one is a fresh bread, and I'm going to be showing you guys how I dry out that bread. Bread pudding is really a dessert created to use old stale bread. Y'all know back in the day when people was buying bread from a baker and things like that, they didn't have all these preservatives and chemicals and things in the bread. So that bread would get bad and stale after a few days. And so you want to repurpose it and make something else. This bread that I made is a Ghanaian sweet sugar bread. If you guys want me to share the recipe for that, please let me know in the comments. My husband and I and my friends, we ate the other loaf, and then this one I allowed to get dry for this recipe. To prep this, I am going to cut this bread into about 1 inch to 1.5 inch chunks. Some people like to remove the crust, but for me, I feel like why bother? It adds flavor, and I feel like that's a really unnecessary step. If you don't have stale homemade bread, this is what you're going to do. You're going to buy a whole loaf of this brioche bread. Now, y'all can see I ate on it a little bit, okay, because I know I was going to use all of it. But see, you don't eat on it because you're going to need all of the bread if you don't have another loaf. I'm only pulling out about 2/3 of this loaf, and I'm going to cut it into cubes. As you can tell, this is super soft, fresh bread. Now, I could have left this out for a few days to get stale out of the packaging, but I want to show you all what to do if you want to make this the day of. So I'm going to cut it into my chunks, and then I'm going to place it onto a baking sheet. Don't add oil, don't add anything to this. And I'm going to stick this in my oven at 350 degrees. I'm not even necessarily going to preheat my oven. I'm actually going to just stick the bread in there the moment I turn the oven on because I really want to dry out this bread. If your bread is not dry, then the custard will make the bread pudding soggy. It will not be right. So I'm going to stick this in here while it's preheating, let it heat up, and then let it go about 5 more minutes or until the bread starts to look golden brown but not burnt. Now, of course, it's only toasted on one side, but really the toastiness doesn't matter. What matters is how dry the bread is. So I'm going to flip this. Then I'm going to stick it back into the oven for about 1 more minute or 2. Then I'm going to turn the oven off. I'm going to just let this bread sit in here and dry out while the oven cools down for the next maybe 30 to 45 minutes or just whatever time you have. It will make the bread super crunchy but not super brown. Now let's make this delicious custard. This is really going to add that flavor. So I have a 1.5 cups of whole milk. Baby, don't go with that skim milk. Don't go with that 2%. Get some whole milk. We want some fat and some richness in there. And I slightly warmed the milk. And into this, I'm going to add a packet of instant coffee. I don't typically have coffee made at my house. So I am going to use this instant coffee to add a little coffee flavor that really complements the rum and the vanilla. Sometimes instead of using instant coffee, I would add a 1/2 cup of Bailey's if I had that. That will also add a great flavor. All right, to this, I am going to whisk 3 eggs and then add a whole can of evaporated milk, every single last drop. Then I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Now at this point, if you're really ready to get the sugar foot, baby, you go ahead and put in some sweetened condensed milk. I'm using 1/2 can of sweetened condensed milk. If you want to use the whole can, use the whole can. Really, the sweetness is up to you and how sweet your bread is. Brioche bread and the sugar bread already have sugar, so I don't want to go too far with it. I am going to put in about 3 tablespoons of the rum I soaked the raisins in, and a tablespoon of vanilla, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. If you already know for sure that this bread pudding is about to be delicious, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and spam the comment section with some fire emojis, because y'all, you know this is about to be fire. All this goodness we put in here, it can't help but be good. Now guys, what I like to do is put all of my bread in a bowl and then pour my custard on top of my bread so it can go ahead and start to absorb the custard. I know a lot of people like to do this while the bread is inside the casserole dish. However, I want a thick bread pudding, and that's really just my preference. I want the slices to be tall. So I'm going to put this in a casserole dish that you're going to think is probably a little bit too small. All right. But you could also put this in a 9x13 dish. And if you do that, then you don't need to pre-soak it in the bowl. You can just do everything right in the dish. So this is a 7x11 casserole dish. I'm going to butter it down real good all the way up to the brim, because this bread pudding is not going to rise too much, but this is going to be packed. I did forget to put in my heavy cream. I do typically add about 1/4 of a cup of heavy cream, so I'm just going to add it now. Y'all, this bread pudding, this ain't rocket science. It's going to come out good, okay? You want to gently stir your bread, but not too hard, because then you're going to break it up into pieces. I just want to flip it over a bit so whatever's at the top can get a little love on that custard on the bottom. And then I am going to pour this into my dish. Again, if you want to use a 9x13, you can. It's really up to you and how thick you want it to be. Either way, it's going to cook well. Now, this is a tip I have for you guys. I like to put in half of the soap mixture and then add all of my raisins. This is another reason why I like doing it in the bowl, because I really don't prefer raisins cooked on the top. I know I can't be the only one who feels like raisins really burn when they're exposed to the heat. So I like to let them be covered by the other layer of bread pudding. Okay. And I'm also going to use a 1/2 cup of pecans. I'm not going to put all of the pecans in the middle because I feel like nuts will just kind of toast on the top, whereas raisins will burn. All right. So I'm going to put the rest of the bread pudding mixture, and the additional custard is just going to soak down and continue to hydrate the rest of the bread. You want to let this sit for at least 5 minutes just to make sure everything is well absorbed. I'm going to pack it in to make sure there's not a lot of air spaces. And as you can see, my mixture literally comes to the top and puffs up a little bit, but it's still going to cook well. I'm going to take the rest of the pecans and I'm going to get them down in the crevices of the bread pudding because I don't want them to overly cook. And so I'm going to put them all around. Then I'm going to press it down and I'm going to place this into a 350-degree oven for 40 to 45 minutes. You don't want to overbake because you definitely don't want this to be dry. Remember, we're just cooking the egg. Let's make a delicious vanilla glaze. So I have 3 tablespoons of melted butter, a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I have a cup of powdered sugar. You can use anywhere from a cup to a cup and a half of powdered sugar, depending on how sweet you want it to be. Then I'm going to add enough milk so that it gets to the thinness that I need it to be. I'm going to start off with just 3 spoonfuls. And yes, it's just a regular spoon, honey. It's not an official measurement, guys. And then I'm going to mix it. If I had to guess the measurement, I'd say I probably put about a tablespoon. And then I went in with about a tablespoon more because I felt like it was just too thick. You want to have this glaze already prepped while the bread pudding is baking, because once the bread pudding comes out the oven, you are going to add it while it is hot. This is the texture you are looking for. It's been 45 minutes. You can see the bread pudding is nice, golden brown, slightly puffed up, not too much, and the pecans are nice and toasted. When I tell y'all, this smells so good. Your house has the smell of pecans and warm spices. Absolutely delicious. Right when I take it out the oven, I'm going to add the glaze all over. Any that I get on the sides that won't absorb, I just pull up the sides with a knife and it'll sink down. And when I tell y'all the corners and the crust is the best part, this is so good. It almost looks like a little fritter or something. But y'all, I shared this with my coworkers and they gobbled this up. I allowed this to sit for about 20 minutes before cutting into it. I feel like it needs to set, though I know some of y'all greedy folks gonna try to get it straight out the oven. Give it a second. Calm down. Don't burn your mouth, all right? Getting too excited. But look at that. A nice, thick piece of bread pudding. Beautiful vanilla glaze, pecans, raisins, and rum. A little bit of coffee flavor. Absolutely delicious with tea or coffee. Whether this is a dessert or a little something you like to have with a breakfast, everyone is going to love this recipe. Let me know if you are going to make this, and when you do, tell me how much you love it. Goodbye. I'll see you next time in Kamira's Kitchen. God bless.